Yes, Sami Vaya yan Hope Matsuwa, but you can call me JD.
Nikki Vinci and Hopi Matsiwa, but you can call me Didi.
Welcome to the Indigenous 21 podcast, where we discuss modern Native narratives
in the 21st century.
So, last episode, we discussed me leaving the whole metaverse, social media, and the impact of social media. I wanted to kind of take it a step further in this discussion. The TikTok app has opened a huge portal for many Native people to experience other stories and other narratives of being Native. For those who already follow me on the TikTok app, you know that I don't shy away from quote unquote controversy with the Native community. Like I'm willing to, I don't know, how would you describe my interaction with other certain pockets
Playing
of the
devil's
Native community?
advocate.
I don't know. And some people say that they're annoyed with people who play devil's advocate, but like, yeah, these are facts.
I don't know. No, these are just, it's your perspective. It's your thoughts. You don't sugarcoat your own thoughts.
Well, and it's because it's based off of lived experience, right? And I try my
And
best
things
to
that you
acknowledge.
were taught.
Yeah. But yeah, like what I was raised with, my exposure and what was dictated
You've
to me as far as
ultimately-
our cultural world.
Yeah,
you
and
know?
things that you've ultimately made up your mind about as you've grown.
Correct. I think that's a big thing too, is me. And this is something that I constantly remind you about. Like, we're not kids anymore. We're not the kids anymore. And that's something that I think you're not the only one. Like, I think some people are very hesitant. What was the line I used with you earlier? You don't not
You're
want to be the
scared.
kid anymore. So,
Oh yeah. You're not wanting to be the adult.
yeah.
You don't want to be, you act like you don't want to be the adult.
Yeah. As in that Native cultural aspect of like, I tease, because you're older than me. I tease people my age or older than me. I'm like, you're not a kid anymore, right? When it comes to responsibility and know-hows. And so it's a mixture of that, of like what was dictated
And when
to
he's
us
talking
growing up.
about responsibility and know-how, he's talking about traditional stuff. When it comes to modern decisions, like even like maybe taking time to go out with my friends, for me, just me and myself, I tend to have a conservative view, especially when my parents are around.
Of what are they
my
gonna
mom,
think about
my mom
this?
specifically.
Yeah.
So he tends to tease me about that. Say, you're a grown ass woman. To me, it's no matter how old I get, my thinking is I still owe that bit of respect to my mother or any of my elders.
Even though she has her own house and doesn't live with her mother.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
It's always what are they
Yeah.
gonna think if I do this? I'm like, I can get that. For those who don't know my age, I'm entering my 30s now. And so it's a mixture now of me in my lifetime analyzing at what was instilled to me in my upbringing, as far as like, this is how, what you're supposed to do, and wanting to push the envelope and questioning like why? Why can't this change? And it's interesting coming across, different people online with different perspectives. And I think that's the hardest thing for a lot of us, is the word ethnocentrism comes to mind, where thought of like, oh, there's the way I was raised, and trying to apply that to everybody else. That's
Right.
not how the world works. Your world isn't the whole world. I don't know. What have you seen as far as like my interactions with said community or said controversies? How do you see it as?
No, you're straightforward. No filters. You cut straight to your points. But that's it. You're not considering how it's going to be received, and you really don't care on how it's going to be received. That's not your intent. Your intent is just to get it out. Whatever you're thinking in here, whatever you're feeling in here, it's an outlet for you, basically. And it's a really raw outlet. A lot of people like it, and then there's even more that don't like it, especially if it hits on their own, if it hits on, yes, their own identity, or a sense that where that they can relate to, relatability. That's the best way I can put it, because I can get that way too when I'm at work. I've been told that I'm harsh. People tend to take my written communication in a way that I don't intend. And even though I try to keep that in mind with my communication, I'm pretty straightforward too. And I get straight to the point. I don't have a whole lot of fillers in. Mine is just pretty much point. These are the reasons why, that I think that's just our personalities.
I think it
So,
really boils down to like it's effective. We
mhm,
don't beat around the bush because we don't want to waste
mhm,
our time. Why take the long route when there's the straight route to get to the point?
mhm.
Recognizing again, it's the intent isn't to harm or isn't to
Be malice,
yeah.
being
Yeah.
malicious.
It's just I honestly
You're just saying what you think and you're
I
thinking what you're
honestly
saying. No,
well,
I'm just kidding.
it's my capability, and I'll admit too that some of my responses to, certain not necessarily arguments, I
Mhm.
will admit that my responses to some of the things that I'm speaking directly is out of emotion. And yet
Right.
I still tell other people like putting emotion aside, this is what, this is
Yeah.
trying to sort through that the grayness into the black and white.
But see, here's the thing, when you put that after the
Yeah.
impact that you've already made, people have already taken the first part
Yeah.
and shut off the rest of it.
Yeah.
At least most people, but people that are really listening with intent or maybe with an open mind get that part. And those are the ones where you can see, the back and forth, the conversation. I have seen a couple of them, though, a couple of your comments where there are people in opposition of your thinking and they voice that, but they know you're not being disrespectful.
Or
You're not
they're still
coming,
willing to
you're not
stay.
yeah, you're not coming from a place, like I said, of malice or trying to be disrespectful. You're just giving your education and your upbringing and your knowing of the subject matter at hand. And you're just challenging it. So a lot of I've seen where they have been like, I don't agree with it, but I appreciate, you bringing this side to it, this
Yeah.
perspective
Sharing.
to
Yeah.
it. It's made me think on things, but I haven't changed my mind.
And
And those are the things that I like.
that's a recent interaction that I've had. Those who are biracial have
Mhm,
one foot in the Native community, another foot in another. And one thing that I
mhm.
always mention to a lot of my followers and in my videos is that, like I know that my thoughts that I'm sharing are coming from the single tribe Native. It's
Mhm.
like I always try to acknowledge and bring up in the fact of when people are arguing over Native identity, I always try to bring up and to
You're
not
speaking
advocate
from
on behalf,
pure
but to point,
blood. You're being
to point
pure
out,
blood. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, not to advocate for or speak up for, but to point out that there are members of our community who are multi-tribal or biracial.
Mhm,
I don't know what that
mhm.
experience is, but it's still an experience that's out there. It was a really, back and forth, very passionate, and that's what I let them know too. I did the original person I responded to was like I'm not saying that I agree with you, but like
Mhm.
I am appreciative of hearing your perspective because it kind of was like a conflict back and forth exchange. I'm not gonna block you. I'm not gonna silence you. It's just that we voice what we've had to say, and I'm gonna continue to do
The
my best to
conversation is
listen
done.
to what you have to say. Social media platforms is you have the choice on whether or not you want to stay in following and listening to them
Mhm.
or to leave them. What are your thoughts on the concept of like, oh, I get to filter who I allow in my social media bubble, and I'm only going
Mhm.
to listen to people who have the same perspective. Is that a healthy thing?
Well, that's something I do in my personal life anyway. I filter out people
Mhm. But
who
it's
I
not
let
like you
in my
shut them out though, right? Because there's the option to like
There have been,
unfollow or
yes,
block.
yes. In real life, yes, I have shut people out. It's because there are points that I've gotten to and reasons.
Mhm.
I don't block people just because I disagree with them. As far as social media goes, when I block, it's because there's something about their messaging or their point of view or their advocacy that is fundamentally in
Negative.
opposition of what I believe in. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I can choose to shut that off because that's not what I believe. That's not what I choose. I'm thinking of it from a form of, how like forced assimilation. And I'm choosing to block any attempt because for the most part, those people that really go hard and they really,
Push.
yeah, really push, that's the mindset that I go to. While they're just trying to do a forced assimilation on me, and it's like, you're not going to do that to me. And it's like, you're trying to gaslight me, or you're trying to change my mind, and the only one that can change that is me. But and it's like, and it's just not going to go anywhere. So why should I continue bumping my head against the wall? That's something that I have a very low tolerance of, and it's through different factors of, my story, my life story, that where I ended up having a really low tolerance for things like that in order to save myself from a lot of scenarios throughout my life. And even now, it's just that I filter and block people out. Stuff out. And people might say that I'm trying to be like snowflaking or whatever, bend it to my world, or bend my world to what I only want it to be. And I think it's okay to do that to an extent. If there's something that is triggering, that is going to cause harm or bring you down mentally, physically, or that you really feel that is an imminent danger to like your life, just in any way, capacity, you have that right to disengage, disconnect, and protect yourself.
It's interesting you saying, like, I completely get the aspect of personal boundaries in terms of what is going to cause you turmoil, what is going to cause you stress. I believe that every person has a right for their own sake of, it could be argued safety, but just overall health, in general.
Yeah.
You have that option, you have that decision, cut out who you want to. And again, it goes back to that cultural aspect, though, to where, being raised in a Native community, it's like, you really going to do that to family members? It's like, you kind of sometimes have to, unfortunately. Sometimes family are the worst at inflicting the harshest pain.
Yeah, and it's really easy for people to judge on that, especially when it comes to family members and community members, that's not what we believe in. And back then they even had tolerance levels of what was allowed. If you weren't acting right in the community, people were sent away from the community. It was because there were events that kept reoccurring and happening in their behavior that it's like, okay, you're no longer a trust or no longer beneficial to our society, our community. So, and then that's when they would have, I don't want to say exiled, but
technically that's what it was. It in a form,
I know,
is a form of
I can't think of a better word. Yeah, it's exile. Yeah.
But in a sense of, so the word that I use, and for those who don't know, I do work with children. There's a phrase that I use. Okay, we're in a merry-go-round here. Like, we're not going anywhere. No room for, like, neither of us are growing from this. So what is the benefit of it? What use is this interaction? And that's the mentality that I try to take going forward with these social media interactions when I come across other people and users who have differing perspectives and views contradict with mine. And as long as, I think what we appreciate more than anything is when that is communicated. I don't agree with you, but I'm still willing to listen. And having that open, admitting to that openness of like, I'm not 100% with you, but I'm still willing to listen and hear you out, because the intent there is always for growth. It should always be growth.
Yes. I was just speaking to one of the youth at the event today, and that's what I told him. I said, you need to think about why you're doing something, why you're starting something. And he's learning how to grow his own plants, his own nutrition. He's a starter. He's been doing it for about from what he told me, 3 years now. So he's just picking up from different teachers, I believe his mother, some elders in his community. I saw how he handled, he brought an offering, which is the tobacco. And then I saw how it was kind of handled. I've been taught to from some of these elders, some of these same people that wanted to instill something into me. I never ask for the information. It usually is just taught to me and I listen. I told him, I said, the intent, it matters what your intent is. Why are you doing it? Why are you starting it? Why are you continuing with whatever it is that you're engaged in? Is it because it's a fad? Is it because it is the current trend, or is there because there's an end game to it, a longevity that you're thinking about? I guess that's what everybody has to think about with these different interactions on social media. Why are you engaging in these channels? Why are you giving these platforms your attention? What was that girl's name? The one that was talking about the conservative. Remember, she was talking about cannibalism tribalism and indigenous people when one of her audience members was asking her about two-spirited people and she just brushed them off. And it's like, and people get appalled, from her response. It's like, that's kind of response she's going to give, though. Why are you even surprised? Same thing like with all the channels that show Trump stuff. I actively block those type of channels. And everybody, did you see the latest thing that Trump said? And no, because I don't give him that platform. I don't want to see it. It's all the same stuff. It's all the same messaging. To me, it's toxic. So why would I even give it that platform, So I guess it's the same thing, with all of those different content creators, out there, all the social media interactions. Just basically, why are you even engaging in it in the first place? If it's for entertainment and you want tea, if it's giving you some kind of, I guess, giggles and ha-has for momentarily, even it might be a little healthy dose of toxicity, I guess. Maybe that's okay. Something like, I guess, like reality TV. There's my cat. I'm sorry.
That's your realm, though. I've always hated reality.
I know. Like I said,
I'm a big nerd. I'm like on YouTube now. It's like mostly like history channels is what I want.
Right. Like, or real crime channels.
Yeah, you're like true crime. And didn't you used to watch Jersey Shore?
Well, that was the trend back then. Like I said, that was just a trend.
Well, back then, I still thought it was.
Yeah.
So in terms of how we interact with the diversity of our community, that's the main thing that I love to see on types of platforms is it introduces us to the diversity within our own community, because with my many identities that I have, that I embody in different communities that I am a part of,
right,
there is a sense of controlled visibility. There's some sort of controlled factor into meeting spaces off of digital media platforms. And what we have the freedom to do in digital media is to pick and choose who we want to associate with, who, the side of ourselves that we want to show, mostly based off of interests. A lot of humor, a lot of people can humor. If you're into a specific, art community, what I like about the diversity that is exposed to us is something that we would not have really come across.
One of the biggest examples is the water protectors movement. When the Keystone Pipeline was being put in, the indigenous community came together. The thought of how many nations we reached. Indigenous nations, not just in the United States, but worldwide. That is freaking awesome. The fact that we still, back then we had those connections anyway, as far as trade would go, because we already had those runners or people that would do the trading, with one another.
Yeah, based off of historic relations.
Yes, but we already had that. It just took longer.
Yeah.
Longer.
Like now everything's just
it's
instant.
more of at the drop of a hat. But even then, because there were only these select few people that were chosen to make those journeys for those trade exchanges, they were the only ones that got exposed to those types of communities, so outside communities. Now, almost everybody is able to take a peek into the window of different cultures. And it's very educating because you get to understand how another community gives blessing, what kind of offerings that they use in the way that they pray, or maybe like just basically etiquette, cultural etiquette, do's and don'ts for that particular community. You also start to understand the boundaries of each community too, as far as what specifically for them, what visitors like maybe us, even though we're indigenous, but we're not of that particular community, we still have to be beholden of the respecting boundaries. Just because we're native, that doesn't mean we get an all access pass. To everything for one another's information and cultural exchange. And some people, I guess there's an argument, like you said, out there, the negative side where you're sharing too much. And I think that's for everybody's everybody's own conscience on what their upbringing was, because everybody's, even if we're from the same tribe, our upbringings and teachings are going to be different, you know, from village to village, family to family. It's all different based on what we were brought up with. I guess it brings a lot more tolerance, like I said, and understanding.
I will point out that one of the bigger impacts that social media has had on our community in terms of share, you know, cultural exchanges was the social distance powwow page that was featured on Facebook. And those lives and the amount of drum groups from various different tribes, you know.
Those are so much fun.
And it was so cool to see a Pueblo tribe on there too, you know.
It was cool, yeah.
Because everybody knows the powwow drum group. Everybody, you know, has heard those songs, but for them to allow a Puebloan representatives to sing the versions of our songs, which aren't your typical powwow cadence, you know, because of that, they were able to have their recording sessions actually release a couple albums because of that. Other than that, they were just doing, you know, like local shows here and there within
and only if you knew of that group, you would get invited to certain things to, you know, showcase at.
And not just, you know, not just like traditional stuff, native gatherings, this art venue, seeing them, I can play their album right now on YouTube while I'm painting, you know, like that's really, really cool. And it's not just their, even though it's cool to listen to, it's not just their raw recordings that they uploaded themselves. But going back on the note of the controversy from our conservatives within the indigenous community of the things that we share online. I think that, you know, it's going to forever be this back and forth debate on like what is acceptable. For those of you non-natives, it's mostly for the protection of preventing appropriation, because that is the number one ultimate harm that our communities have suffered from, you know, for over a century.
Of visitors coming in saying that it was just going to be for a specific purpose, and then they go and break that. I guess it wasn't written contracts, but the agreements, you know, person-to-person agreements of what those recordings were going to be used for. And then most of the time, they didn't even ask anyway. They didn't even ask for permission. They did it anyway.
But it's gotten to the extent now where we are even policing our own people now. That totalitarianism attitude, though, of like, you shouldn't be posting this.
Right. There are going to be more people that are going to be more traditional than thou. And that's fine. I mean, I really, there's always going to be these people in the community that are holier than thou, and they have that purpose in the community to remind us of what's what, and maybe even teach us of what's what if we don't know. There's that part of yourself of self-regulation too. If you know what you're doing is not what you should be doing, but you're doing it anyway, that's a choice. And that's something that we choose to take on and live with and maybe even answer for. There's always going to be that back and forth, that pushback, progression versus traditional. It's just hard to find the balance, and there's always going to be that. Also, it's going to be in existence for forever.
But also, if you really want to try to enforce censorship, only going to encourage, you know, other people to find a workaround because it's already out there. You know, you're not in all effectiveness actually like stop it from happening. It's going to occur. You can push the message and, you know, campaign for like, we should shift our attitudes towards ceasing this practice, but that doesn't mean it's going to go away completely. So with the cat already being out of the bag, I think we could use this opportunity. There was an idea I had a while back on what our attitudes could be. It's really more so we have to approach it as from an educational rather than a entertainment stand, which is what it's been taken for in its early days with so many different dances that are posted from our villages, social dances that are posted onto the YouTube platform. And for non-tribal members, for those who aren't, you know, familiar with our, you know, Southwestern cultures, I think they honestly may see it as like an entertainment video versus this is not a performance. It is a ceremony.
Yeah, it's a ceremony.
Yeah.
I'm part of a pageant committee, and that's one of the things that we also in as far as the programming, you know, and putting it in there, we make sure that we're careful on how we word certain things. That's not what it is. It's for a purpose. There's a reason behind it, and I think that's something that I guess outside community members will get educated on as they start to expose themselves more and more to the communities. And that's the thing. If they're coming into the communities just as looky-loos, then that's going to go over their head every time. But if they're coming in to actually immerse themselves and learn with intent, then they'll start to pick those cues up, and there's going to be people in the community that are willing to educate them because they know which ones are the looky-loos and which ones are actually coming in to learn something.
And for those who are watching who are, outside of the Native community, I realize that a person's understanding of what they see is only going to be limited to what their own cultural upbringing. And so when you have certain cultures that do say, oh, dance is for entertainment, dance is for celebration. In our community, it's on a much more serious level when we're, again, language matters. When we are having these performances, it's not necessarily celebration. It's an act of prayer. The way you have to see it is, how would you behave in the middle of a sermon? It's that same.
Yes.
It's the same.
Yeah.
Would you make the same comment? Would you do the same gesture? Would you do the same actions in the middle of a sermon? That's how you have to.
Yes. One of the examples from today's event, there was an opening prayer that one of the elders were doing, but a looky-loo was coming in and she was messing with your setup.
An open vending event too. I was an artist vendor, native gathering event, and as natives do, it's like, opening blessing.
But here's the thing:
people roaming and still walking around.
Yes, but here's the thing: you need to pick up on freaking social cues. Okay, almost everybody else. Everybody else in that area, the vendors were standing, had their hats off. The ones that weren't vendors, they weren't talking. Grass. They were, their attention was to the elder. There was a lot of people with their hats off, but yet this looky-loo, she's still moseying about. And then she, I guess, kind of like moment, not of silence, but of listening. She's freaking loud, asking a stupid, for us,
ignorant question.
Ignorant question. Yeah, I guess for us it's rude. It was just being rude and during basically a sermon.
This person was not a young person at all, too.
They weren't.
By no means. They weren't even in their 40s yet.
No.
Everybody was hush. Everybody was, and it was a listening moment. I don't think she was loud. It was just that everybody. No, it was only in comparison because everybody else was hush. She was just in a normal tone voice. She didn't yell, but it wasn't like this level.
It wasn't conversation level.
We were at a distance.
It wasn't at conversation.
So I think she was. Too.
She was close. Yeah, I was closer to her than she was to you. So to me, in my perspective, she wasn't speaking in a conversation tone. It was up.
But she wasn't screaming either, though.
No, she wasn't screaming. She wasn't yelling, but she wasn't
at a comfortable.
Bring it down. Yeah.
No, I get that. It wasn't a stupid question. It was a genuine, curious question. It was just a curiosity.
For the moment, in the moment of what was happening.
Which she did not know, though. They did not. I know you want people to pick up on social cues. But again, that's not their culture and heritage. They don't know. That would be like me going into a synagogue and whatever prayer.
There is such a thing as being, fucking awareness, Be aware of your surroundings. Jeez.
They're old. They're not
aware. I know. I'm sorry.
And that's me dissing elders on this podcast.
Elders.
Right
now. No, I'm just kidding. They're old, so they get excuses. There's no excuse. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, that will wrap it up for this episode. I had fun recording this one. I'm hoping you guys can share your thoughts with us. Hopefully you guys got the humor. And let us know, what are your thoughts on social media? What are the positive, the negatives, impacts on our community? How do you feel as an Indigenous person? Do you feel represented in these online platform spaces? Let us know. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening. My name is JD.
And my name is Didi. Please follow us on our social media platforms on Instagram and Facebook. You can find our I-21 logo. Leave your comments. We hope to see you in the next one.